start this now.
Okay.
On the way, Morgan a duck shower no bedeshi quendish na cosmo quado dem o jabwinish na beck quendao nipsing nindonjaba. Mimi gwetchwendam kinogego gimin ganomin get sagin gives you ton kinogego and she be matsuat kinawaya. Rajaman one we bequetch the good not mawshin geshemin a don not mawshin. Schwenishnang geshemin a do schwenishnang. 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 Nikanagina miwetch. So I was asked to share the creation story, the Anishinaabe creation story, for this virtual camp. And it's one of the things that I really enjoy doing is to share the creation story, because all through my life, I have come into contact with people who were so happy to share that creation story. And the most important thing that I learned over the years was that that we did give thought. Our ancestors always thought about where it was that we had come from, how we came to be here, and what was our intended purpose. And the answer to those questions is perhaps most important to our young people, especially after all these years of being told that their ancestors were wrong, or that they hadn't done anything to make this a good place to live, and to make this a good place to raise their children. And that we were being told all these messages about how wrong we were. And the creation story is one of the places where I have learned how to answer those questions. And so, so I'm going to start the story in the way that I've come to understand it. This story begins, the Anishinaabe creation story begins with the Creator. And the Creator at this, at the first moment of the Creator knowing that he was in fact a spirit being, that he was a spirit, and that he had consciousness. He was conscious of himself. And in that awareness, growing awareness that he had, he began to realize that he was sitting in complete and total darkness, that there was nothing that he could feel or be aware of as being around him except this very complete and total darkness. And he came to that realization, and he wanted to know if in fact he was right, if that was true. And so he thought, how was he going to find out? And what he did to check that was he sent out a sound. And that became the first sound of creation. And the sound that he sent out was like that. It was like the sound that a shaker makes. Some people call them rattles, but we call them shakers. And that sound went out from where that spirit sat. It went out from him, and it moved away from him and kept going. and it never came back. And he did that several times. He sent that sound like that. He sent that sound out, and it never came back to him. And so by doing that, what he confirmed was that he was in fact alone. And he began to feel that aloneness, and how hard it was to be alone. And in coming to that realization, he began to create within his own mind a thought about how was it he was going to change that. How was he going to change that situation so that he was not alone anymore? And so he began to envision what he would rather see than all of this darkness, that he wanted to see more than what was there. And so he began to have this vision about what it would look like and how it would unfold. And when he was ready, he sent out his thoughts, and those thoughts went out in all directions. And it began to unfold in the way that he had envisioned it. And so his vision came about, and he saw stars and planets and moons. He saw galaxies surrounding him. Everywhere he looked, there were elements of the vision that he had had. And as far out as he could see everything unfolding in the way that he had envisioned it. And it was beautiful. It was absolutely magnificent. And when he was finished sending out his thoughts, he knew that that this vision would continue to unfold for a very long time. And nobody knows how long ago that vision started to unfold and emerge from him. But he realized and he saw that it continues to unfold and emerge even to this day. And so there are ways for us to see that nowadays, but we didn't see it back then. Our ancestors didn't see it in the same way that we would. They didn't have a, what do you call that? A Hubble telescope. They didn't have that, but they knew that the vision of the Creator continues to unfold. So how did they know that? But anyway, back to the story. So when he was finished sending out his vision, he looked out over the things that he had created, all of these galaxies and star systems and all the rest of it, and he realized he was still alone, that there was nothing coming back to him from all of these things that he had created. Nothing was coming back. And so he was still alone, even though he was surrounded by all this beauty of the universe, all of this creation. He was still alone. And so he began to give that thought. And in giving that thought, he finally asked the question, where will life emerge? And he sent out that question. And then he waited. And he waited a long time. So then he asked the question again, where will life emerge? And he began to consider that question, and he waited for an answer. And so he asked that question a third time. Where will life emerge? And he waited again. And he seemed to be waiting for a long time. And finally he asked fourth time. This time she answered him. And she said, we will have to find the right place and the right time for life to emerge. And in our creation story, there comes a realization that the Creator is both male and female, that they are a complete spirit of both male and female. And yet they have different work to do. And so they went out. They went out amongst the stars and the planets and the galaxies, and they checked all kinds of places. They looked everywhere. They looked at all of the different characteristics of the planets that they had created. And they found some were too hot, and some were too cold, some were too dry, and some were covered in mist. Some were just plain rock or plain sand. And each place that they touched and checked out in that way was found to be not quite the right place, the right, I suppose, combination of factors to support where life would emerge. And so finally, as they were traveling around, checking out the universe, they came to a place where the planet was covered in water. And it was completely covered in water. And she said, this is the right place. And they touched that water, and all of the particles and the dust and the bits and pieces that they had collected on their journey fell into that water. And when that happened, it began to change. The nature of that planet began to change. The water started to move around and shift and separate, so that some of it remained salty and some of it became very clean and clear. And in different parts, land began to emerge from under the water as the water moved to fill up deeper spaces. And there were mountains that came up out of the bottom of the oceans, and they began to change the character of this little planet. And so everything about that planet changed. And she said, and this is the time in which life will emerge from this place. And so life began to emerge in that place. And some of the life emerged into the water, some of it into the salt water, some of it into the fresh water. Some of the life began to emerge on the land, and some of it between the land and the water, and some of it in the swamps, in the mud, in the kind of still waters that were there. And some of it began to emerge to live in the air. And this happened over a very long period of time, the different forms of life that emerged. And so they watched that. They saw all of this happening. And they were happy to see all of these different forms of life, some very small and simple, and others very large and complicated. All of these creatures began to emerge, and they lived out their life. And um, and they saw all of this, and they saw that all life began in the same way. That there was a form of conception, and then birth, then there was a lifespan, and finally an end to life. And each of those creatures and forms of life that emerge, whether they were plant or animal or bird or fish, they all had their life cycle that they lived out. But it always had the same elements of conception, birth, life, and then finally the end of life. And and they saw how that worked, and they saw that each of the parts of creation, the animal life or the life on that planet, that earth place, they worked together. Everything fit together in such beautiful harmony that each part could rely on the other to give life and to support life in its own way. And so, the creators, they looked at that and they saw that it was good. It was very good life. And yet, even with all of the work they had done to create that life and to make it possible, there was still no communication back to the Creator. And so, even though with all of this life going on, he was still essentially alone. He still was alone, because all of these ones lived according to what would be considered original instructions, but they lived by instinct and by knowing where they were in the um, in the in the place that they emerged from in creation. That all of their life was lived um, by that certain knowledge of where they fit. And so creators were still looking, still waiting for that sense of connection, I suppose, with all of life, and they had the connection of being the catalyst that formed life, but they didn't have a continuing connection. And so they came to a time when they realized that they would have to do something different. And so they decided to create a different form of life. And so they gave it thought, and they considered what they might do and how they might have to do it. And so they gathered up their materials from the different parts of the earth and took it to the spirit realm. And it said that they worked for a long time, that they gave great thought to what they would do. And they wanted this being, this new being, to have particular gifts and ways of doing things, and have a certain mind and have a certain heart and spirit in order to live out the life that they were being given. And so they set about to create that. And And I don't know how many times they worked for that. So at some of the places where I was told about the creation of human beings, there are different ways that the creation stories tell you that. And one of the ones that I particularly like is the telling that includes the creator um, taking up these various parts and bits and pieces from the earth and holding them tightly in the palm of his hand and and putting his thoughts to the creation of that one. And um, and so when he was satisfied with what had been created, he decided that he would share his thoughts with that one. And so he put his thoughts into that one's mind. And then also had that one, gave that one the capacity for emotion to feel. And determined that these ones would have a spirit. And the spirit would receive instructions from the creator. And so that was done. And and then the creator used his own breath to give him life, to be able to breathe, and gave him his original instructions, and then instructed him to go and start his life. And the first three, when they were told to leave, um, they left really fast. They were in such a hurry to start this human life that they'd been given. And off they went in their directions. The fourth one was reluctant to leave. And so the creator finally asked that one, what is it? Why are you still here? And that one, who we came to know as our first ancestor, was reluctant to leave the creator's side because he didn't want to lose his connection. He wanted to always be able to connect with the creator. And so Kshemenado, that kind spirit, recognized how hard it must be to leave your father's side. And so he gave him tobacco. He gave original man tobacco. And he told him, if you hold this tobacco, hold this medicine in your hand, you will always be able to connect with me. I will be there, and I will pay attention. And so Kshemenado reassured our original ancestor of this ability to connect with him. And so then Kshemenado said, now begin your journey towards that human life that you have to live. And so Kshemenado watched as that one began to make his journey. Anishinaabe left his side. And then he stopped again. And turned back to the creator. And Kshemenado asked him, what is it that's troubling you now? And he said, well, how will you know it's me? How will you know that it is I who is calling upon you? And Shaman Edo said, I will name your spirit, and by the name of your spirit, I will know who you are. So Shnabe was once again reassured. Now, so now he continued his journey. He's feeling pretty good, and then he got thinking again. And he stopped again, turned back to the Creator. And he asked him, who will be standing with me? Who will be there with me when I call upon you? You will know who your relatives are because you will be given a clan system. You will have a clan. And when the time is right, you will be given that clan. So, so, so Original Man continued on his journey, feeling well assured. And so he continued on, and then he stopped again. And he turned back to the Creator, and he was looking, and it was so far away, and yet he could still just barely see the Creator. And the Creator saw him, and he said, why do you hesitate? Why are you hesitating? And he said, how will I address you? How will I address you with my Sema? And so this time Geshe Menado said, I will give you a language. You will have a language, and that's how you will address me, and I will know who it is by the language that you use. Okay. Now when you turn around, don't look back again. I need you to see where it is that you are going to. And as he turned around, the Creator opened up the clouds, and he showed Original Man where it was he was intended to go. And now suddenly he was hurrying. And he was beginning to hurry, and as he hurried and got closer and closer, he saw how beautiful it was. He saw how beautiful the earth was, with her grasses and her water and her forests and all of the creatures living there. And as he got closer and closer, he began to point his toes so that he wouldn't disturb even a blade of grass, that he might not hurt anything as he arrived upon the earth. And as he was arriving, the animals stopped what they were doing, and they paid attention to that one Original Man arriving on the earth. And they saw one that had been sent from the Creator's side. And they were very ready to help him. And so in in his time of arrival on the earth, the animals and the birds and the fish and the turtles and even those ones that live under the earth and live between the earth and the water, they all saw him, and they celebrated his arrival. And for him, for Original Man began a journey. And he had been given a task by the Creator. And so he set about to complete that task. And he walked everywhere. He traveled right across the creation, that place where he had been told he would live, and he traveled all across that that territory, and he went everywhere. And as he went everywhere, um, he would see different forms of life and different parts of creation, and he would name each part, each thing that he saw, each creature or animal or however you want to say it. Each part of creation was given a name. And so when he felt that he was finished his task, he went back and he found the courage to call upon the Creator with tobacco in hand, and um, called to the Creator, and he asked for the Creator's attention and said, I have done the work that you set out for me. And the Creator asked him, are you sure? And he said, yes, I have done all that work. And Mishnah, or original man, said, but I have noticed something in that makes me different. And he said, and what is that? He said, well, every other part of creation that I have seen, everyone has two. There's always a partner, but I'm the only one without a partner, without a helper. And so Creator said, well, I want you to go back and I want you to make sure that you have looked under every rock and under every leaf. You have found every part of creation that you can find. And so I'm going to give you a companion. And so Maingan was given as his companion. The wolf was given as companion to this one, to original man. And so they set out. They set out to work together. And so they traveled across creation, and they looked everywhere that they could possibly think of to look, and sought out every part of creation, every part of creation that was living. And they were looking for all the parts, all of the bits and pieces, and the plants and the animals and crawlers and flyers and swimmers and the four-leggeds. And they looked everywhere and they named everything. And so finally they were satisfied that they had done their task. And so now they went back to the Creator and got his attention and said, we have completed the task you set for us. And so now Gijamanido was satisfied that they had done their work. And now finally, original man was given his name. And he was given the name Wewenabusho. Wewenabusho is like giving good greetings. And so Wewenabusho had earned his name, but he also had lived according to the teachings of his spirit, of his names, and the spirit name that he had. And so Wewenabusho was happy for that. And then the Creator, Gijamanido, said, now the two of you have finished your work together, and you will no longer be together as partners. Maingan will go back to his pack, And now, once again, Wayne Beaucage is on his own. And he's going to continue to live on the earth. He's going to continue to walk on his journey. And so Maingan went in his own direction, and he went back to his family. And now Wayne Beaucage was on his own. And so he started that part of his journey. And so this part of his journey, there are a lot of different stories contained within the story of Wayne Beaucage's journey and his I suppose traveling across the creation, what happened to him. And there are lots of stories about what happened to him. But finally, he arrived at a place by a lake. And there he encountered a young woman who was living with her grandmother in her grandmother's house beside this lake. And I personally, it's not part of the story, I personally have always wondered, where did they come from? How does it happen that this young man, Wayne Beaucage, traveling around, coming directly from the Creator's side, now encounters a grandmother living with her granddaughter beside a lake? Where did they come from? Does this mean that women were created before Wayne Beaucage came? I can't tell you. I don't know all the answers. There's a lot of different stories that explain how women came to be here before men. This is a part of the women's teachings, and so I've always thought, okay, so there's a story about a woman and her daughter. She's raising her daughter beside this lake, and the spirit of the west wind, now he's become enamored of this young woman, and they create new life together. But the question still remains, where did the mother come from of this daughter? How did she come about? So that can be a pretty fascinating project to research all the ways that women are explained in the creation stories. But that's just me thinking out loud. I have a tendency to believe that women are born from the earth because we call the earth our mother and we call the moon our grandmother. And so it's logical to me that we came about from the earth itself, that we were here before men, but that's me speculating. I'm just trying to think, how did they get to be there? So maybe that's something you want to check on and see if it makes any sense to you, all the different stories that come about. Anyway, suffice it to say that Wayne Beaucage and the daughter of the west wind became partners, and over time began to create new life. And they lived on the creation in such a way as to always benefit from their relationship with the earth and the animals and the birds and the swimmers and all of the different parts of creation, like this berries and the nuts and the roots and all of those things. They learned how to live here, and they raised their children in a good way, to believe that the earth was their mother, and that they had a responsibility in that relationship with the earth. And so they never did anything to harm the earth. And that when they needed to take the life of an animal to feed themselves, they always gave tobacco to the spirit of that animal to give it thanks for being so willing to share. And so I'm going to leave it at that for the moment.